and welcome everyone to the 6th in the series of webinars from the MTE partnership this spring, kind of giving an overview of a lot of the work that is going on. Today we are focusing on the mathematics of doing, understanding, learning, and educating for secondary schools, otherwise known as Module S². And I'm sure that you came up with the title first and then the acronym just sort of naturally. But we're pleased to hear from Allison Lishka and Jeremy Strayer, who are leading this effort at Middle Tennessee State University. On the next slide, just some basic ground rules. If you could just go ahead and mute yourself, or I can mute you if you don't know how to do that. And if you could use the chat window, which is depicted on the slide, and just put in the chat if you're having any technical problems or if you have questions and comments, and then we'll make sure that they come to the attention of the presenters. So just add in whatever comments or questions you have. And with that, I will turn it over to Allison and Jeremy. Thank you for doing this.
Great, thanks, Gary. So we have goals for today's webinar. First, we're going to provide you a brief overview of the MTE partnership. And then we're going to learn more about what we've been doing with the modules rack and about opportunities to connect with us and think about joining in some of this work. So that's where we're headed today. So the overarching problem that the MTE partnership is addressing is the shortage of well-prepared secondary math teachers. This has been an ongoing problem for a while and doesn't seem to be improving a whole lot. Nearly 1 in 7 beginning math teachers leave the profession after their first year, and we know that the quality of preparation has a lot to do with teacher attrition. So the problem that we're addressing is that, and in order to address the problem, we formed the Math Teacher Education Partnership in 2012, I believe. It is focused on partnerships. So originally, every team that joined as a team of an APLU or SMITI institution of higher education, a K-12 school district, and then at least one other organization. And you can see the dots on the map where all of our institutions are. All of the blue states have MTE partnership institutions in them. And across the teams, we work to include both math educators, mathematicians, and K-12 educators in the work of the group. All of the work that we're doing in the Math Teacher Education Partnership is built on a networked improvement community design, and a NIC, as we call it. So did I skip a slide, Gary? I think we missed one. Nope, never mind. The NIC design, I'll keep going forward. The NIC design is improvement work that's a rapid improvement cycle. So you're focused on a common aim. Our common aim is that we want to increase the number and quality of mathematics teacher candidates entering the profession. Also, the work is guided by deep problem analysis. So at the very beginning of the partnership, there was a lot of time spent on developing what the guiding principles would be and digging into what the problem is caused by and what its different branches are in order to shape the work of the partnership. We're also well aligned with the AMTE standards for preparing teachers of mathematics. The work is based on disciplined inquiry based on continuous improvement. So we use these plan, do, study, act cycles. We plan what we want to do, we enact it and study it using common measures, and then we review the measures and consider what improvements that we want to continue with. And we're networked to accelerate progress. So we have the opportunity to share our work across a variety of institutions and get input from a variety of contexts as we move forward with the work. And that will become important in the later work when we talk about modules. So the MTE partnership is guided by a driver diagram. And you can see on the left, that is our aim for creating a gold standard for teacher preparation. And then you see our primary drivers in the middle. And the primary drivers, creating a vision, improving clinical preparation, increasing content knowledge, and improving recruitment and retention. Those are the problem areas that were originally established by the partnership as places where we wanted to work in moving forward. And then on the far right-hand side, you see the research action clusters. So those are our responses to addressing these problems. And you can see highlighted in red the modules rack. We are focused completely on increasing content knowledge. Specifically, we're looking at increasing content knowledge in upper level mathematics courses. Throughout that work, we're also thinking about how this can transform programs and how we can promote equity and social justice across the work. So that's how we fit into the larger MTE partnership driver diagram. We do have an annual conference coming up. The registration for that has closed, but if you are not registered and are interested in this work or connected to this work in some way, please reach out to us. And that's coming up at the end of June, and it is our 8th annual convening of this group. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the workings of the modules rack.
Sounds good. Thanks, Allison. We, as a RAC, have been fortunate enough to get funding through an IUSE NSF grant. Within our action cluster, we have all types of different kinds of folks involved. So some folks listed here are board members like Christine Franklin and Matt Andres, who's on this call. Other folks are our teacher consultants, who are K-12 teachers involved in the writing and also professional development activities in our group. And then we also have folks on this list like Holly Anthony, who's a part of the Research Action Cluster, but not on the grant. And then the PIs of the grant. So the folks at universities that are underlined, I believe, on this slide, those are all folks who are PIs on the grant. All right. So what is the problem that we're trying to address? Well, there's a disconnect between mathematics content courses that pre-service secondary teachers take and the actual work of secondary mathematics teaching, right? So this is a common complaint that folks have when they think back on their preparation and they're doing the work of teaching, they're thinking, what were all those upper division courses for, right? I don't see myself like using that in the daily work of teaching. So we're trying to address this disconnect in the work that we do because we think that that disconnect actually is a missed opportunity for developing mathematical knowledge for teaching. So we want to increase the opportunities that pre-service secondary teachers have to develop mathematical knowledge for teaching in their content courses that they take in their preparation. So how we're doing that, like these bottom 2 points on this slide kind of start to get at how we're addressing the problem through educative, developing curriculum materials and then implementing those curriculum materials. So we'll talk a little bit more about those next 2 in the slide that's next, which is our modules driver diagram. So our aim, well, what we're after is to improve prospective secondary teachers' opportunities to develop mathematical knowledge for teaching as they learn mathematics in their undergraduate content courses. So that's our aim. We want to make it measurable, so we're saying we want this to happen. We want to increase these opportunities in at least 30 mathematics faculty members' courses by 2022. So looking at this in preparation for this webinar, I thought, I think we can legitimately claim that at the end of next academic year, we'll have, if everything holds steady, we'll have been in 24 mathematics faculty members' classrooms, at least. And that's not folks who are on our team. So 24 folks not on our team. If you included the faculty members on our team who've piloted, it would be even more than that. So I feel like we're on track to achieving this aim. What is to be addressed? I'm just going to focus on the top two here. And this is kind of included in the aim a little bit. We want to provide opportunities for prospective secondary teachers to use MKT and obtain feedback that will help promote their own development of MKT, right? So we want that to happen in their secondary mathematics classes. And we also, so that's kind of the middle primary driver, and then the top primary driver, we want to have mathematics instructors like engaged in that process, like valuing that development of MKT in their content courses, and then like being engaged in that process of developing that MKT. So that's what we're after. How we're going to address it is in the secondary drivers column. So I'm just going to focus on the top three. And I'm going to move to the second one, actually. So we're designing and revising those educative curriculum materials, and Allison already referred to this a little bit, that we want to position undergraduate mathematics instructors to promote prospective teachers' development of MKT, but also teaching in equitable and just ways. So that's kind of a thread that we're wanting to stitch through all of our materials. So to support those activities, we have professional development for people who pilot with our materials. So it's a 4-day intensive summer experience, and then we have extended throughout the entire academic year 2 different ways to engage every single month for all of our piloting faculty. While we're going through that process, we're gathering data. So this is jumping to the top secondary driver. We're gathering data, analyzing the teaching and learning in the courses taught by piloting faculty, all with the goal of improving those materials and improving the ways that mathematics instructors provide those opportunities for MKT development for prospective teachers. So that's what we're going after. I think that's enough. There's a lot of writing on that slide.
There is. Your every diagrams are detailed.
Yeah.
So what we have done so far in the chart on this slide, you'll see the topics for each of the modules that have been developed. Algebra and geometry were piloted this year, so all 3 of those modules are complete and have been piloted over the last academic year. Mathematical modeling and statistics, I think they're done. I know by the time we meet with our piloters in June, they will be ready to go. We're kind of putting some finishing touches on a lot of those over the next few weeks. But the topics are set, and most of the work of the writing is done. So we have all 12 of our modules written in first draft form. Along with this work and the data that we've been collecting, we have been developing a way to figure out whether or not prospective teachers' mathematical knowledge for teaching is developing, because that's what our goal is. We really want to see that there's development of mathematical knowledge for teaching, but in order to do that, you have to have a way to describe it and analyze it and think about observing it. So we have been refining the framework that we've been using. It's a research-based framework based on a variety of sources. And it's been developed in conjunction with analysis of our data. So it's been a cyclical process to develop that. As Jeremy said, we're also working on professional development for our piloting faculty. So we've been working on that throughout the year. And as we're doing that, we're thinking about how we can come to understand the implementation of these materials across a variety of contexts. So the contexts are different with who the students are in the courses that are using these materials, but the contexts are also different based on the university and the instructor themselves. We have mathematicians piloting the materials. We also have math educators piloting the materials. So we're looking at the variation across those and trying to make sense of what is happening as instructors are implementing the materials. So opportunities for engagement with the modules rack. We are going to do a second round of piloting for all of the modules. Our official piloters for the next academic year are already set, and that will be for statistics and modeling. But then for the 2020-2021 academic year, we will be piloting geometry and algebra again, and we will be looking for official piloters. And when I say official piloters, those are piloters who agree to provide us all of the data that we ask for and participate in the professional development in exchange for a stipend paid by the grant. We also do entertain some unofficial piloting from members of MTEP. So if somebody is interested in that, you just have to reach out to us and let us know, and we'll have conversations about how that might work. In the summer conference, we're going to be talking a lot about the development of the approximation of practice activities. We call those simulation of practice activities, and they're the place where we're gathering data about how prospective teachers' mathematical knowledge for teaching is developing. It's kind of a key component of each of the modules. There are two types of approximation of practice activities in every module. One of them, the prospective teachers respond in writing, and in the other one, the prospective teachers respond in a video. And in both cases, they're responding to student thinking or student work about a particular concept in that curriculum area. We're also going to be working at the summer conference on incorporating equity and social justice elements into the materials. And the last thing we're going to be working on is developing PDSA cycles to document our progress. I think this is going to give us a spot to pause and see if we have any questions. So if you have questions, you can enter them into the chat, and Gary will let us know if any of those have popped up.
Well, I will contribute one of my own.
It's going to be a hard one, isn't it?
It is, actually. No, not at all. But
I'll let Jeremy answer.
but yeah, we'll put Jeremy on the spot.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that's interesting to think about, which is when I was looking at the driver diagram, you had kind of circled the transformation and the equity as themes that were running throughout. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of reflecting on the equity came through pretty clearly. The transformations, I think, may be more implicit. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking about, for example, some of the work that the Active Learning RAC has been doing on looking at transformational change in departments, departmental change. And, you know, I know that you can't do everything at once, but is that a part of your thinking of kind of addressing some of the departmental culture around teaching prospective teachers, or how is that fitting in?
So I don't know that this is something that we're directly addressing, but it's something that kind of is going on. It's kind of in the air, so to speak. So this go around when we're identifying piloters, there were at 2, maybe 3 folks who contacted us and said, hey, we are like restructuring the way we are preparing pre-service high school teachers in our department. We're actually creating a new course or 2. And so, in fact, I just heard back from one person today who they were wanting to specifically address modeling, but it was in a course that was part of a bunch of other stuff that was going on. So he couldn't commit to teaching. We wanted them to teach 6 to 8 weeks with our materials in the piloting round, and he couldn't commit to that big of a commitment, but he's still interested in using our materials later. You know, this is going to be the first time they're restructuring, going through the restructuring. So maybe he could pilot later on, or after we're done with this grant and have released the materials, he might be able to draw on some of them, maybe a module or 2. So as folks are transforming their programs and thinking about what the future is going to look like, I think there's a place for our work to speak into that.
And there are a lot of conversations as we're developing the materials to think about how do instructors with different backgrounds interact with the materials? Because that's part of the goal in program transformation. If you've had somebody who's been teaching a particular course forever and they're either a mathematician or a math educator, then they have a particular approach to that particular course. So in writing these materials, we're trying to write them in such a way that no matter what your background is, you can pick up these materials and use elements that are beneficial to supporting the development of MKT. So in that way, we're kind of addressing transformation. We'd like to have a bigger vision, but it's hard to have that until you have the materials written. And then you can take another step and think about how do we get these out to more, into more sites and having a bigger impact across programs.
I'll take that as a good answer. I mean, I just think that it's, you know, a lot of times math departments don't as much focus on or value the preparation of teachers, particularly secondary math teachers. So I think there may be an opportunity to think about that as you evolve, to think about what are some of the cultural issues that you may be going after as well, and not.
Yeah, some of those are coming out in the piloting, right?
I would imagine.
Yeah, we have like some like mathematicians who really care about teacher preparation, and they've taught courses in a particular way for years, even maybe, and they kind of have the mathematics all lined up in their head that they believe is important that the pre-service teachers engage with, but then some of the approximations of practice type activities is kind of challenging. I don't know if challenging is the right word, but just kind of maybe spurring some new thoughts about what it means to prepare pre-service teachers to like develop mathematical understandings that they can actually draw on in the work of teaching, and kind of deepen that from a mathematical perspective, not necessarily from like a methods perspective. So yeah, that's an area that maybe we could be a little bit more explicit with moving forward. Think about how we're addressing that.
Well, I mean, I think it's like you said, it's in the air, and it's almost subliminal, but it just feels like it's an important point to, as people go forward, to for them to kind of rethink the role of math departments in preparing teachers. It's not just here, you know, here's the math, go and do something with it, but really thinking about how that connects to practice. Okay, Wendy has a really good question. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to say it, Wendy?
I could just say it. I've got a two-part question of what's a main challenge you've encountered when you're trying to prepare the educative curriculum materials, and how well do you think these materials are working in your pilot?
Well, I answered the first. I went first on the first question. So.
Let's see. So your first question was a particular challenge that we've encountered.
That window, yeah.
So we have a wide variety of folks working on this grant, and we don't all necessarily come from the same perspective. And so the materials look very different. Well, I don't say they look different. They're written differently in different content areas. And so one of the things that we're being challenged to really think about is how to make this a cohesive product that seems like it's all coming from the same idea when you have such a variety of perspectives contributing to the work. But I think that makes it stronger in a lot of ways, because we are drawing on a variety of perspectives and thoughts about how these materials should be taught. It's pushing all of us to think about how we teach a little bit differently. What was your second question, Wendy?
How do you think the pilot's going in terms of, you know, are the educative curriculum materials, do you have any kind of preliminary evidence that the faculty member using this are learning anything? Or, you know, it's like, I know what the intent is, because I've talked to you, I mean, I know and I've seen some of the things, but how well is it actually working? Are people taking up these ideas and applying them just like you want?
Applying just like we want. I'll say we're very careful about that. There are some elements that we ask them to use specifically, but we also encourage instructors to make it work for their setting and their classroom. So we're not really pushing for exact implementation of the materials, but the general theme and purpose behind them should be preserved, which I get the sense from our piloters that is what's happening. Jeremy, you've interacted across both sets of piloters this semester. I've really only had interaction with the geometry piloters.
Mm-hmm.
The geometry piloters were trying their best to implement with fidelity as closely as they could, but then took some liberties in places where they saw places where they wanted to. So I felt good about that they felt like they could make them their own to some extent. But they are using the pieces of the materials that we feel are important for the prospective teachers. And I think some of them are actually surprised by some of their students' reactions and what they learn about their students' thinking from them. So in that, I think it's giving them an opportunity to kind of rethink their practice a little bit, which is good.
Yeah. So we strongly encourage our piloters to, if they need to adapt the materials in different ways to make sure that they meet the needs of their course and their students and their particular context, that they need to do that, right? Rather than feel like they're pleasing some people who are like, we don't want to impose some sort of curriculum or external goals on them. Like that's kind of relates to the next question from John Sutton, which says, are you using communities of practice for those implementing modules? And if so, how are you engaging these piloters in the communities of practice? So I would say yes, though, like with communities of practice, there's like bringing folks in to have them engage in like legitimate peripheral participation or something like that. Like I think we're taking the view that everybody is already in the community, right? So we think of our piloters as folks who are already experts, like they know their context, they know teaching, they know mathematics. And so kind of as a community of folks aiming for the same goal, developing math knowledge for teaching in these content courses, how can we use these materials to best facilitate that process? So I think the materials are going well, and the evidence that we see is in the professional development activities that are occurring throughout the year. But also, I guess maybe the first bits of evidence occurs during the summer PD, where we have each piloter participates in a rehearsal, right? As a team, they plan a rehearsal, and then they'll enact like a 10-minute teaching episode. So those are video recorded, and then as part of the academic year activities, they will teach a lesson that includes the little bit that they did a rehearsal on in the PD, but like the longer lesson. They'll record that and send that in. So we haven't analyzed that yet for like variation, but we're looking forward to digging into that. But just the ways in which the piloting faculty are engaging in the online discussions, and the way if they make modifications, they'll share the modifications with each other. If they bring in some outside materials that they thought was helpful to have their students move forward, or if they restructure things in some way, they're just very open and engaged in sharing those types of modifications with each other. So overall, I think we're really pleased. Mm-hmm. Yeah, at this stage, though it's ongoing.
So I wanted to go back to a comment you made about fidelity of implementation. Mm-hmm. So Paul LeMahieu from the Carnegie Foundation, who has been one of our mentors over the past years, mm-hmm. talked about the distinction between fidelity and integrity. Mm-hmm. So fidelity of implementation sort of implies I'm doing it faithfully the way you asked me to do it. Mm-hmm. Integrity, his argument is about honoring the spirit and the intent, although feeling free to kind of change things that need to be changed. And I'm really big on integrity over.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that's maybe kind of a useful way of thinking about it, because people have to do what works for them. and not just like blindly. It's like, oh, on day 3, we have to do this, whether or not it makes sense. So
And
I like that.
if we want to have an impact in the way that you questioned earlier, Gary, about moving into program transformation, you have to do that with integrity, not fidelity, or else you're not going to get buy-in from faculty. So, okay, are we ready to go to the last slide? More questions?
Come on, John, you have one hard question left? No?
Well, we'll have more questions after this, so I'll do our last slide and then we'll come back if there are any closing questions. So moving forward, we are revising materials, and we're revising them based on feedback from the piloting faculty. We're also revising them based on the student work that we've collected and student feedback that we've gathered. And we're also continuing to work on equitable teaching practices and including contexts that involve equity and social justice issues. That's an ongoing process for us. Another thing that we're trying to continue to think about is support for the implementation of materials. So how is that included in the writing of the materials? As we move forward down the road, how is that going to continue? Those are things we're thinking about. And of course, we're continuing the research on the development of MKT and activities that support it. Our view and perspective is that we have research out there that says whether or not somebody has MKT, but we don't really know how it develops. And this is a prime area for us to be digging into this question. So that's something we're going to continue to be thinking about. So that's, any more questions, closing thoughts?
I'll just say for myself, this, I think is extremely important work for program transformation. This is a big gap, I think, in a lot of programs. Convincing departments that this should be a priority is kind of the other side of the picture of going beyond just the people who volunteer to how do we really embed this as a priority. I mean, I just think it's such a big challenge, and having materials that really help to support programs is going to be very critical.
Having the materials, but also having evidence that of what impacts it has on student learning and instructor thinking and work is also important. That's something we can go to a program with an argument that's supported by data.
Good.
And I would also like to add, I'm really excited about how you're focusing on the development of the MKT, because we already know what the research says about it being there and changing it. But how that happens is one of the critical missing links. And I'm excited, continuing to be excited about the great work y'all are doing through this. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you can find more information online or by emailing Gary Martin about the research action clusters or the partnership as a whole. And reminder about our annual conference that is coming up June 23rd through the 25th in St. Louis. And so we'll close and say thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for a really informative and thought-provoking presentation, Jeremy and Allison. And we will be posting this on the website as well, the recording of the webinar. So thanks to you. Thanks to everyone who participated.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all. Good to see everyone.
All right. Take care.